the Sovereign of Sorbia. By the time the first light of dawn hit the Sorbian hills, Jurij had been working in his workshop for 6 hours. He had been tinkering with the internal gears of his vintage motorcycle, a machine he called the Sovereign. The floor was littered with polished cogwheels and heavy technical components. He had promised himself that the machine would be ready for the Easter journey through Lusatia before the sun rose. Before he started the repairs, Jurij had realized that the complex ignition system was his Achilles' heel. He had struggled with its wiring for years, but this dawn felt different. He had been studying a detailed technical diagram, his cheat sheet, which he had taped firmly to the stone wall. He had finally found the happy medium between the old mechanical parts and the modern electrical upgrades he had recently installed. Jurij was hungry because he had not eaten since the previous evening. He had prepared a small feast of traditional Sorbian treats to keep his energy up during the long night. On a wooden plate, he had placed several braided Judas buns and a handful of crispy, sugar-dusted angel wings. He had also been snacking on a piece of rye bread topped with fresh ramson and cilantro, which filled the room with a sharp green scent. Suddenly, the workshop door creaked open. Linka had been walking through the damp green ferns behind the building when she noticed the lights were still on. She had been gathering wild garlic since 3 o'clock, following an old family tradition for the holiday. She stepped inside, carrying a woven basket filled with the same vibrant cilantro and ramson Jurij had been eating. Linka looked at the mess of metal on the floor. She and Jurij had been discussing this trip for months, debating the potential route back and forth. They had argued about whether to take the hidden forest paths or the paved roads through the village. Jurij had insisted that the Sovereign could handle any terrain, provided the main gearboxes didn't seize up during a steep climb. To reach the lower bolts of the frame, Jurij had hoisted the motorcycle onto a set of heavy-duty pulleys. He had been checking the pliancy of the new leather drive belt for several minutes when Linka arrived. He checked his cheat sheet one last time, ensuring every wire was tucked away safely before he prepared to lower the heavy metal frame back to the ground. Once the motorcycle was resting securely on its tires, Linka began loading the camping gear into the sidecar. She had been organizing their supplies for days, making sure they had enough for a week in the Lusatian wilderness. She carefully packed the folded tent, the thick sleeping bags, and a small metal stove, balancing the weight so the bike wouldn't pull to one side. Jurij reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of small, carved wooden dice. His grandfather had given them to him after he had finished his first mechanical apprenticeship years ago. He hung them from the handlebars as a lucky charm for their voyage. He had been carrying those dice on every journey he had ever taken, believing they kept the engine running smoothly. The early daylight mist was starting to clear, revealing the tall, dew-covered ferns that grew right up to the workshop walls. Jurij had finally tightened the very last bolt on the engine casing. He had been dreaming of this specific moment all through the cold winter. He kicked the starter pedal with all his might, and the engine roared to life with a deep, rhythmic pulse. Linka climbed into the sidecar and adjusted her leather goggles. Jurij had already donned his heavy jacket and gloves. They had successfully conquered the exhaustion of the long night with the excitement of the open road. As they pulled away into the Sorbian countryside, Jurij realized that despite the gears and the technical gear, their shared curiosity had been the real engine of their adventure.